For this earring, I decided to change up the pattern just a bit and actually put the holes on the outside of the wires and then weave the twisted wire over. It's really cool looking. So I thought this would give you a second example that you could do and you could try. So in order to do that, you're going to take your Sharpie and you're going to mark very close together. The Sharpie is a little bit smaller than the drill bit, so just evenly space them fairly close together. As you drill, you may decide to change this. You may decide that your drill bit is just a little bit too close. You do not want to harm the integrity of the space between. If it's too small, as you're weaving the wire, it will pop through and you'll have one big hole rather than two. But I'm just eyeballing these. Now, you could take a scribe and mark it, but I don't think that that's necessary. I think that you could just eyeball this and make your marks. So I've marked this side. Now I'm going to mark this side. Then once you're done, take a good look and make sure that you have your marks the way that you want them. Then what I would do is make the first 2 or 3 just to verify that they're going to be far enough apart. If they're not, take your fingernail polish remover, wipe the rest of them off, and adjust them. The way that this weave goes, it gives a lot of room for error. So don't worry if the first 1 or 2 holes don't quite look the distance apart that you think that you want them, because you can adjust them later on, and I promise you that you will not see the variance later. So now we're going to drill our holes. I am placing my drill bit at an angle just a tiny bit because I want that as close to that wire as I can get. I'm anchoring my hand on my bench pin. I've got the silver securely between my fingers, and I'm going to just gently start and drill my first hole. Now I'm going to go ahead and move to the other side and drill that first hole. And now I have 2 holes. I'm going to continue up both sides until I have all my holes drilled. So I wanted to show you what happens when you drill too close and you get two holes into one. I want to show you how to fix that. So what I've done is I've taken a little piece of square wire. Now it does not have to be square. It's not going to make any difference at all. But take a round piece of wire, the 16 gauge wire that we used for there will be fine. Just cut you the length that you'll need from one side to the other. And then once you've got that cut, you're just going to simply put it in that hole. Now you're going to want to make sure you've drilled the rest of your holes, because what we're going to do is we're going to fuse this in place. So you're going to want to wedge that piece of wire in there so that it's firmly snug, and then we're going to take it over and we're going to fuse it. Okay, so what I've done now is I have taken my piece, I have put it in the purple flux, set it on my charcoal block. I took the little piece that I'd wedged in there, I made sure it was good and fluxed, it's in the hole. Then I took just a tiny little sliver of argentium solder, hard solder, and I have placed it right where that little fill-in piece of wire meets the hole or meets the base. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to wick away just in case there's any extra flux. I'm going to double check the placement of everything. And now I'm going to solder that little piece in place. Light my torch. And I'm going to heat the entire thing so that the flux will at least go clear. Then I'm going to focus just back and forth where I have that solder. And as soon as there's a flash and it goes away, okay. Now that should be soldered. Even though we did not fuse, the metal is still hot, so I'm going to check, and you'll see how that balls up and rolls off, so it is still too hot to quench. While you're making jewelry, you're going to make mistakes. Please don't think that every time you make something, it's going to be perfect. A lot of making jewelry is learning to problem solve. Silver and gold is too expensive to just toss or to even just throw it back in the recycle bin. There's very, very often a way that you can fix it. If you can't fix that particular thing, you can certainly make something else out of it. Okay, so that's ready to quench. So I'm going to quench it. And because I put flux on it, I am going to pickle it. So what I'm going to do now that I've got this out of the pickle and I've got it thoroughly dried, I have put on a Rio Grande snap-on sanding disc. Now if you're using a Dremel, they also have sanding discs. This is a 220, I believe, or a 320. It is a 220. And I'm just going to gently go over where I soldered both on the front and the back to make it all smooth again. And we'll be back to ready to drill our holes again. You just want to lightly touch the top of that sanding disc down. Now because the wire was not the complete exact shape of those holes, it's not going to completely fill it in, and solder does not fill it in. So the solder has adhered that wire to the holes. So there is a little bit of indentation. There is a little bit of indentation. But because we're going to drill a hole anyway, we really just needed to create a barrier between the hole that broke through and the other hole. So that's not going to matter at all. But we've got another place to drill now, and I will take a good close-up picture of this so that you can see this. And now we're ready to drill our hole. And now we're ready to drill that one additional hole. Just moving it over slightly. I'm going to lubricate with a little dab of wax. Place the drill bits firmly where you need to drill and go slowly. And now I have two holes instead of one big one. And we're ready to continue. So now that we have our holes drilled and our round wires are firmly affixed to the earring, we can trim off these edges. Now you can saw them off, which would probably be the best way, but because I have these good snips here, I'm just going to snip them. Now keep in mind that anytime you're using snips or shears, they're going to pinch as they're cutting. But that's okay on this. What it does is it makes the wire have a slight dip right before it's sheared off. But that's okay because these won't cut completely up to the edge anyway. And we'll sand that off. So again, with the same sanding disc, I'm just going to sand those ends until they're flush with the earring. And you can see here that they do stick up a bit. And now when I look at the sides, I can tell that that's flush. I can run my finger along there and feel that it's flush. Okay, I wanted to show you, I use my jewel tool all the time for so many things other than just the polishing. But it is a very expensive tool, and I know that most of you are not going to have it. So I did want to go over the smaller radial discs, the 3M discs. They do come in various sizes. You can buy them individually, and then you'll buy your mandrels, the little steel bit that it goes onto. Those do not come with the discs themselves. You can buy them in a kit. This is a larger kit, 3M radial bristle disc master assortment. In that, you've got different sizes and different grits. So here's some coarser grits. The wheels are much larger. Now you're going to want from 3 to 5 on a mandrel. So this one has 3 on it. This one has 5. The difference of how many you will put on there is strictly preference. Also, if you've got a lot of little bitty small places to get to, the 3 will be fine. Most of the time, I put 5 on there. This one has, I think, 3 or 4. They're all very worn, so it's very difficult, I know, for you to see. But after you have fused and you've pickled your earring, now you're going to want to polish it before you weave your wire. And the reason for that is you're never going to be able to get back to this place again. You're never going to get to many of these little places where the wire is going to go. So it's good to give it a good cleaning with the Dawn and the brass bristled brush, and then to give it a good polishing. So this time I'm going to, even though I have already polished this one, I've got my other ones over here, and I'm going to polish them with my flex shaft, or if you have a Dremel, you can use a Dremel. And I'm going to show you how to polish them using that rather than the jewel tool. So here is one of the other earrings that I have that has been pickled, and it has been washed, but it has not been polished. So I'm going to start with the coarsest grit that I have, because we're not bringing it to a fine polish at this point. The 4 that I've pulled out here are going to be good enough. This is the coarsest of the ones that I have. and you're just going to hold it steady and then polish. Now you don't want to push very, very hard. There's no reason for that. The grit is in the tips, so just go back and forth, gently polishing it. The first grit is going to remove the most, but you don't want to jump directly from the coarse grit to a soft grit. Each time you go down a grit, you're removing the previous trenches that the grooves, the microscopic trenches or grooves that the grits previous to that have put in. If you jump too far too quickly, you're not going to be able to remove the deepest grit grooves. Do your back. Then you're going to go to the next grit down. There are also silicone discs. For something with a wide though expanse like this, I don't like to use the silicone disc. Now if I'm going to polish a bezel or a ring or something smaller that I want to get in and out, say I wanted to get really deep into those grooves, the silicone discs are great, and I do use them a lot, but these will go in and over, just like for here. These individual little radial discs will allow that wire to go up in there, and it will get right up next to that. So now I'm going to the blue. You can see the difference in one side here. I've done the blue. I have not done that side yet. And you can definitely see the difference. The next one will be the pink. I'm not worried too much at this point about bringing the back to a nice good shine, but I did want to make at least 1 or 2 passes over it in order to if there was any remainder residue from the pickle or the cleaning, then it would definitely, these would get it off. And there you have it. You'll notice how beautiful and white this argentium silver is. And the cool thing is we did not have to use any solder to get those wires on there. If that had been brass, copper, or sterling silver, we would have had to solder each of those wires on. And with argentium, they fused beautifully. They're on there securely. And I love argentium silver. And we do solder from time to time, just like when we made the repair. If it makes more sense to solder, we solder. But when we don't have to, we don't. So, alrighty, so we'll go on to the next step now. So now I have my earring laid in the center of my leather bag, and we're going to give it some shape before we weave our wires. Okay, that looks nice. Again, it is over curled. That's fine. I'm just going to gently tap to take out some of the, put it on a harder surface. I'm just going to gently tap. I'm going to use my leather mallet because I don't want to put any marks on it. I'll lay this one up next to it. You want to make sure that you get similar shapes. Just a little movement so it doesn't look quite so flat. And I think those look pretty good. So now it's time to weave our wire.